every single time we have these protests here in 10 Downing Street, my friends. So don't be shy, bring your friends, bring your family, show your support. Because if we do nothing, nothing changes. But if every single one of us does the minutest thing at least to change this terrible situation in Ukraine and to stop this war in Ukraine by stopping Russia, then we will achieve that for sure. That is a certainty. As certain as the sun will set in the evening and will rise every morning, Ukraine will win and this war will end as long as the whole world shows their support. The Russians are selling lies to their own people right now. They're telling them that if only they endure for a little bit longer, because indeed they are enduring. Indeed, Russia is reeling from the sanctions and from the war effort. If only they endure, Putin tells them that they will succeed. We must prove it otherwise, my friends. We must show, every single one of us, that this war will have consequences for Russia. That the war crimes that they've committed will not come by unpunished. And there will be responsibility. That responsibility will be held by the war criminals like Putin and Prigozhin and many others who have started this war unprovoked. And they have admitted it themselves. By themselves, I of course mean Prigozhin has admitted that this war was never meant to save anybody. This war was never meant to stop Nazis or whatever other silly ideas the Russians came up with. No, this war was always there only to take over Ukraine and ransack the country. To take over another state that had signed many agreements with Russia in the past. Agreements which Russia never shied away from breaking. Agreements which Russia has made many. But it doesn't matter how many agreements Russia has made because they've broken every single one of them. If we have diplomacy with Russia now, if we negotiate with the Russian terrorist regime, it will not be a question of whether or not they will keep their word. It will be a question, when will they break it? That is the real question when we are negotiating with the terrorist regime of Moscow, with a great kleptocracy, with a country-sized criminal syndicate, with its capital in Moscow. And now, my friends, as we always do, let's hear the Ukrainian anthem. Слава Україні! Слава нації! Україна! 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 Героям України тричі! Slava, slava, slava. Once again, my friends, thank you very much for coming here today. It is of utmost importance that we show our support. Every single one of us, every single person who knows what's going on in Ukraine and knows how to stop this war by stopping Russia. That's right. Every single one of you who knows this and who's here and who's helping, thank you. Every little bit of help will change the situation. There are many of us all over the world. Right now we have one of our Portuguese friends coming by. We have our Belarus friends, our Lithuanian friends, and many others. And now I will get our Jewish friends, of course. I need to always mention that's where we're going, Tommy. That's where we're going. And of course, we have our Scottish friend Alison, to whom I will give word now. She's a great speaker, and she's going to show that right now. She's going to speak about a very important person who unfortunately has perished with this Russian terrorist attack.
Slava Ukraini.
Heroям slava!
I had a choice today, quite a difficult decision to make, whether to come here to our Maidan here, or to attend the Panikhida, the memorial for Victoria Amelina, I'm sure all of you know, and I certainly spoke about her last week. She was in the pizza restaurant in Kramatorsk with a group of writers from Colombia, and she sustained catastrophic injuries in that restaurant, and it certainly looks as though the restaurant was targeted because it was a well-known haunt for writers, creatives, etc. Sadly, when I was proud to be part of the Ukraine group at Pride, on Saturday she died. Her heart stopped. She was an amazing bright light of Ukrainian literature, Ukrainian courage, Ukrainian identity, and she achieved more in her 37 years than many of us do in an entire lifetime. She had worked on the war diary of Volodymyr Vakulenko, who was one of the others murdered by the Russian terrorist regime. He had buried his diary in the garden, and it was given to Victoria by Volodymyr's father. She died, I was told she died on his birthday. I'd need to check that that's the case, but if that's the case, I feel they've been reunited. I really do. I'm going to read from one of the many tributes to her that has come out online from all over the world. Victoria Amelina was a Ukrainian novelist, poet, and public intellectual. When Russia launched its full-scale invasion of her country in 2022, she set aside most of her writing to document and research war crimes. Amelina understood the risks she ran with this work, both as a citizen who chose to stay in her country during war, and as a writer facing an invading army bent on destroying Ukrainian national identity. She moved her son, by the way, she leaves an 11-year-old son behind. She moved her son to safety in Poland, but kept returning herself. When Kyiv came under bombardment in early summer, she watched the explosions from her apartment and wrote, "The war is when you can no longer follow all news and cry about all neighbors who died, instead of you, a couple of miles away. Still, I want to not forget to learn the names." So she died on the 1st of July. 2 weeks before she died, she wrote about a painter, Polina Raiko, whose work had been largely obliterated in the floods unleashed by the collapse of the Kakhovka Dam. She said, "Art lives as long as the world sees it." This is a poem that she wrote about a crow. I was lucky enough to be with Olga over there at an event in London with Victoria, and this poem was read, and the translator, William Blacker, he translated it on the hoof, as it were, and it's now become one of the major tributes to her. So I thought, given that I heard it first, sort of thing, I would read it to you. It's a very emotional poem. Poem about a crow. In a barren springtime field stands a woman dressed in black, crying her sisters' names like a bird in the empty sky. She'll cry them all out of herself. The one that flew away too soon, the one that had begged to die, the one that couldn't stop death, the one that has not stopped waiting, the one that has not stopped believing, the one that still grieves in silence. She'll cry them all into the ground as though sowing the field with pain. And from pain, and the names of women, her new sisters, will grow from the earth and again will sing joyfully of life. But what about her, the crow? She will stay in this field forever, because only this cry of hers holds all those swallows in the air. Do you hear how she calls each one by her name? None of us are going to forget the name Victoria Amelina. We are going to ensure that the bright light that shone when she did her work remains lit. We know that there is a history of Russia trying to suppress Ukrainian identity, Ukrainian culture, Ukrainian language. It happened in the 1920s and 30s when the writers, actors, dramatists, playwrights, at least 300 of them were shot under Stalin by the Soviet regime. My thought is that the Soviet Union was not a geographical or political entity. It was a state of mind. And in that sense, the Soviet Union has never gone from Russia, because there may have been a veneer of something different, even talking about perestroika and glasnost, etc. But they were words. They were definitely words, because this is the very same frame of mind that tried to stamp out Ukrainian culture and identity in the 20s and 30s. It is happening again, and there will be, and there is already happening, another Ukrainian renaissance. This week they may execute, they may kill like they did, or force, such as Khwilavoi, who took his own life. We will ensure that this renaissance will continue, and we will do it in their name, in the name of people like Victoria, who gave her life for the future of each and every person from Ukraine right now. And I'm proud to have met her, and I'm proud to stand here with all of you. Slava Ukraini!
Thank you, Alice.
Thank you very much. Today, we commemorate today, 5th of July. It's a day of liberation of the cities of Kramatorsk and Slovyansk from the Russian terroristic regime who took those cities by force in 2014. And thank you to all the Ukrainian defenders and the patriots of Ukraine. Those cities were liberated. So those days in Ukraine, we remember all those fallen for the Slovyansk, Kramatorsk, for those who lost their lives defending and liberating Ukrainian cities, towns and villages. One other story is one of the commanders of the Polk Azov. That every life, it's a story, it's a person behind it. And on nearly a year ago, when we witnessed the terrible tragedy that happened in Olenivka, another cruel act of the terrorism caused by the Russians, when there was a massive explosion in the so-called prison camp for the Azovstal defenders, which is not a prison camp that the rest of the world is expecting. No, it's a torture camp, the murder camp, violence, and many wives, daughters, mothers, they expecting their son, husbands, to be back from the imprisonment. Unfortunately, more and more news coming back, and miracles does not happen as we would like, and the belief eventually turn into the sorrow and gravely pain, because more and more stories more and more news coming back that people are dying in the prisons, in those Russian torture chambers. And one of them was the news that Dmitro Bukaryov's sister received recently, stating that her brother, that is a commander, one of the commanders of the Polk Azov, that he unfortunately died during that terror explosions attacked in Olenivka. But people were hoping and still hoping for better, and people are expecting all the husbands, brothers, sisters, wives back. We have to remember them all, and we will. And we must not forget and speak out at any opportunities about all these prisoners of war. We need to make sure that they face the fair justice. And we need to make sure that we remember, speak out to them, and do everything possible to bring them home and to bring the justice to those who causing all those crimes. For now, I would like to all of us have a moment of silence for Victoria Amelina, for the Dmitro Bukaryov, for all the defenders of the Azovstal, for all the defenders of Ukraine, for all those that lost their lives, for the future and the freedom of the Ukraine against the terrorist Russia. Thank you. Thank you. Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
Слава нації!
Смерть ворогам!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Захисникам України тричі! Слава! 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 Glory to Ukrainian heroes! Glory! 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 Thank you. We all know that, first of all, I want to say that this coming Saturday will be the special rally. And so for those who knew and joined our rally today, is we here every Wednesday 6 to 8, Saturday 4 to 6, and Sunday 3 to 5, to remind everyone that the war in Ukraine caused by the terrorist Russia is still going on. To remind the world not to be silent. To remind the world and tell the truth of what's going on in Ukraine. What Russia does to the civilians in Ukraine. That Russia destroys and burn the ground in Ukraine, murdering, torturing prisoners, and everything on their path get destroyed. And only because of the brave Ukrainians, brave defenders, friends, volunteers, ordinary people who does care, who helps this cancer was stopped where he is at the moment. The war in Ukraine, with many people dying because of the terrorist acts, because of the missiles, rockets, shells, mines, explosions happening every single day in Ukraine. There is no day in Ukraine since Russia started full-scale war invasion on February 24th, 2022. There was not a single day, including public holidays, there was not a single day without bombardments. Every single day, people dying. Ukraine is paying terrible price for this. Ukraine is paying huge price with own blood, with own people, for world to enjoy everyday life outside the Ukraine. For world to have a peace and carry on with day-to-day routine. Ukraine is paying ultimate price, and we must stay here. We must stay with Ukraine, support Ukraine in every way possible in order to bring this war to the end, in order for Russia to defeat, in order for peace to be restored, and Ukraine will liberate all its territories, rightly so, guaranteed by the countries and leaders who promise to protect and defend Ukraine in the events like this. It's not enough just to be sympathetic to Ukraine. We don't need sympathy. We asking for help in the way that Ukraine has been promised, in the way that Ukraine is needed, in the way that will bring the peace to Ukraine and victory to Ukraine and the democracy to the Ukraine, to the peace to be restored in whole Ukrainian territory. But this will only happen when we all together united stop the Russia. We'll stop from terrorizing. We'll stop from killing and murdering. The world did little to nothing to prevent this from happening. And the world definitely turned a blind eye in 2014 when Russia annexed Crimea and the east of Ukraine. This is a chance to stop Russia once and for all. But we must stay united. We must combine our effort and not to lose the faith in the victory of Ukraine and not to lose the faith in Ukraine. The only way is to continue your support. That's why this rally is going on here until Ukraine's victory. That's why the people here coming to remind that the war is not over. And behind the peaceful scenery we have here and the people enjoying the day-to-day life, we, on our doorstep, have a full-scale war. That Russia is a terrorist state.
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 Stop Russia, stop the war.
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 We must stop Russia, because every day Russia is causing more and more genocide. Every day Russia is murdering and killing Ukrainians, innocent civilians, exploiting Ukrainian resources. Alison mentioned about the what Russia is targeting. The Russia is targeting the bright Ukrainians. The Russia is targeting the future of Ukraine, which we here to protect for our generations, for the legacy. We're here to protect Ukrainian heritage. At the moment, as we here speaking, Russia is completely destroying everything where they hold on to. The Ukrainians' historical artifacts been looted, the museums been looted, and we talking thousands, hundreds of thousands of the historical pieces that got absolutely nothing to do with Russia. Zero relationship. They just looting there. Every single museum under Russian occupation has been looted. And I'm not just talking about the museum, libraries, archives, everything that can later be rewritten, and everything that can later will remind about the Ukraine ethnicity, history, legacy, our past, our great past. Everything they destroying or looting and hiding. We only hope that we will get that stuff back. We only hope that we will be able to return it with our friends and those who care back to Ukraine, for future generations, for our children to be able to see that past, to learn from what's happening at the moment and not to repeat the same mistakes in the future. But at the moment, the sooner Ukraine liberates its own territories, they will be better for everyone in Europe, for everyone in the world. This war will end with the full liberation of Ukraine, with your help, with everyone's help, with Ukraine friends who supporting Ukraine, and Great Britain being at the front of this support. And we're grateful, Britain, for all this support that British public and the government been providing to Ukraine. We are very grateful for the British government for their support. We're grateful for ordinary people for their support from all nations, not just the Britain, for all nations, whether they in Britain or at home in their own home countries. There are many friends of Ukraine, and we're grateful to every single one of them for their support. For their support now for the last 16 months, and for their support for the last 9 years, since Russia decided that they can take chunk of the land from Ukraine unpunished by faking the elections or acting as a peacekeepers. We don't want them peacekeepers who came to Ukraine and killing not just the Ukrainian speaking people, but the Russian spoken people who actually speak ethnic Russia. If you go to the east of Ukraine and see who fighting for Ukraine now, a lot of the people speak Russian language. So it's not about liberating Russian territories, no. It's about their ego to restore the so-called the empire, and their ego and their willingness to destroy and wipe Ukraine as a nation. This goes way beyond than simply to protect the minority. They planned this. They planned this, but it did not work for them in 2014 on the scale they wanted. Now they opened the full-scale war in Ukraine on 24th of February with the hope to control entire country. What they didn't estimate is that Ukrainians are different and they're not Russians. Ukraine will fight to death for their freedom, for the freedom of Ukraine, for the territory of Ukraine, for the people of Ukraine, for the history of Ukraine, the legacy of Ukraine, for the future of our children. Ukraine is fighting for what we call home. Ukraine haven't invaded any territory of the Russia and never will and never wanted to. So when you're talking about the aggressor, forget all these propaganda stories that saying this is to do with NATO, this is to do with Ukraine wanting to invade Russia. No. Remember, this is the one aggressor, the Russian terroristic regime. One terrorist who came to kill, murder, to steal, to destroy, to wipe up Ukraine as a nation, to wipe up Ukraine ethnicity, completely destroy Ukrainian people, government, just to have another puppet government. But they already bogged in, they already broke their teeth because they aim at something that they will never be able to achieve. Their mission was doomed from before they even started invading Ukraine. One thing they didn't estimate, that Ukraine, it's not Russia. We are not the same. Ukrainians are free, democratic people. Ukrainians are looking forward for future, not to be stuck in the past of the so-called communism and try to restore the great empire that some in Russia still want to do. No, Ukraine is moving forward with a changing world, and Ukraine want to see their children to grow up without being threatened, without the fear. And this is what Ukraine is doing right now, and what Ukraine is standing for. Stand with Ukraine!
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 Слава нації!
Смерть ворогам!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Героям України тричі!
Слава! Слава! Слава!
My friends, make no mistake, news about atrocities in Ukraine are not something that comes on once in a while. It's something that happens every single day. And I'm going to tell you about one of these news. The Russians have hit the city of Pervomaisky during the farewell ceremony for the fallen Kraken and Azov fighter Oleg Fedenko. About 200 civilians, children and women came to the ceremony. Now the question rises, why did the Russians hit the ceremony? There was no military men there. There was no cannons, no tanks, no artillery, no planes, nothing. There were civilians coming to show their support for Ukraine and for one of the Ukrainian heroes. What was the point of killing these people, of trying to kill these people? What was the point of trying to shell them? We still don't know what are the casualties, but we have seen people who got grievously injured. What was the point? The point, my friends, was that Russia, as a terrorist state, doesn't care if it hits civilians or military men. In fact, Russia prefers to hit civilians to spread terror in the population that they are trying to conquer. And we must never forget about this. We must never forget about the Russian crimes. My friends, this Saturday, we will be organizing an event of counter-protests. And to tell you about this event is our friend Tommy here, Tommy Three Flags. Let's give it up for Tommy.
Thank you. Slava Ukraini. So, yes, we're organising a counter rally, and it'd be wonderful if you could all be there. There are several. It's we can only hit one. The so-called stop the war. They're like polystyrene. They get everywhere. So we're hitting the one in Ealing Broadway. So if you come out of Ealing Broadway and turn left, when you come out of the tube station, you get to the Lloyd's Bank. At midday, you can't miss it. So there we can counter their arguments about that Ukraine should negotiate and enter peace talks. Because after all, yes, Ukraine should enter negotiations and peace talks. After all, the war is going badly for Russia, and how dare Ukraine defend itself? Ukraine has no right, as far as so-called stop the war are concerned, Ukraine has no right to defend itself, and it should just give Russia what it wants. There should be no support for Ukraine. Let's overlook the fact that as a sovereign, independent country, Ukraine is entitled to get all the help it wants, as any other sovereign, independent country. I remind that even this country in the past has had help in its conflicts with other countries. So, who was I? Like I said, so they object to NATO membership. Again, this is whether you like NATO or whether you don't. It is really up to Ukraine to decide its own future, and only Ukraine to decide its own future, and Russia to have no say whatsoever in what Ukraine does or what any other country does. So, amongst other things. So, if you could all please be there before the rally here at 4, which will be presumably here as usual. If you could make some time to counter rally at least one of the so-called Stop the War rallies. This one will be in Ealing Broadway on midday. We just keep getting the message out. And if I may, I just want to do a little bit of bad humour. I just want to ask my young friend here, Pavlo. I'm going to put on my persona, Mr. Stupid, Mr. Speaker. What about? Slava Ukrainian!
Heroям Slava. Thank you very much, Tommy. Thank you very much. This is our friend Tommy here. You know, one of the main people who comes here all the time, mind you. Everybody can come here. Everybody can make some time, my friend, like Tommy does. Now, my friends, I have to remind you what Tommy has just said before we move forward about the counter protests that we are going to do, because this is something very important. You know, we have to face our opposition head on. We can't be shying away from it. We can't be trying to avoid it all the time. You know, some people are best to be avoided because some people just have mental issues. But sometimes, most of the time, when they organize a protest against us, against Ukraine, against a better world, we need to say something about it. We can't allow it to go by. Now, what Tommy has been telling you about was the counter-protests we were planning against the hypocritical movement of Stop the War that will happen this Saturday on 8th July at Ealing Broadway near Lloyd's Bank at W55JU. This will begin at midday, so we should show up there and do a counter-protest against these individuals. And there will be another one in Lewisham, Deptford Market near Douglas Way, SE84AG, from 3 to 4:30 p.m. My friends, show up, show your support to Ukraine, and let's show our opposition that we will not be made silent. Now, I would like to present another one of our regular attenders here, who has a message for all of you.
As some of you people know, for about the last year and 3 months now, I've been collecting second-hand gadgets, laptops, telephones, and tablets, and also any leads if you have them. British Ukrainian Aid kindly take my parcels over to Ukraine, and I have a friend in Zaporizhia who distributes them to people who need them. Anything that's in good condition goes to a teenager who needs education, because as you know, most education in Ukraine has to be accessed remotely by now. or sometimes to, for example, a medic at a unit near Bakhmut who needed a machine to keep track of what he was doing. So we were able to provide him with one. And recently we also gave out some laptops in Kiev to people who had left Mariupol and were now trying to work and volunteer in Kiev, but of course that's quite difficult without any kind of gadget. And we've started giving phones to soldiers who are in hospital, because quite often soldiers are evacuated from the front lines with nothing and they don't even have ways to contact their family, but we have been able to provide them with a few phones. So any gadgets you can give us will be really appreciated by someone in southeast Ukraine. And even broken ones are useful, because we also in contact with the radio resistance guys in Zaporizhia, and they will be able to take the chips out of your broken phones and put them in drones. So hopefully you'll be motivated to go home and look in your drawers for whatever devices you may have. I'm here every Wednesday when possible. If you don't see me here, then Olga there, or Blonde Alison, who everyone knows, will know how to get in contact with me. So please consider digging something out, even if it's really old and broken, we can almost certainly use it. Thanks very much. Slava Ukraini.
Thank you. And standing joining these rallies for a long time. So, as she said, for anyone who able to help for the good cause and donate old mobile phones to Anna, I'm sure every single one will have a more life in Ukraine. Анна сказала, що Анна, наш волонтер, вона займається тим, що збирає уживані телефони, які потім йдуть на Запорізький напрямок, і там у них появляється друге життя, навіть якщо вони частково не функціонують і ви можете їх принести, то, будь ласка, підійдіть, принесіть на ці раллі в середу і можете дати або Анні, вона тут кожної середи, або групі волонтерам, і я впевнений, що вони ще послужать на благо України і допоможуть нам перемогти ворога. I'm going to say another announcement that I did briefly mention that on Saturday we'll have our usual rally here, but the main subject for Saturday will be on what is going on next week, and the main agenda would be for the summit of NATO happening 11th and 12th of July, which is a very important subject to bring up, because it's directly will affect the future of Ukraine, and this directly would affect the resolution of this war and will pave the path to the future of Ukraine and will hopefully guarantee that and will work as a preventive measures to stop the Russia from even thinking invading Ukraine in the future, which I'm sure they will withdraw from Ukraine. And Ukraine will prevail, and Ukraine will win this war. But for them to even think about this in the future, the world will come up again for NATO summit on 11th, 12th July in Vilnius, and the subject of Ukraine will be the major subject to discuss. So this Saturday rally will be directly we'll be talking about the impact, consequences, and the desire of Ukraine to join the NATO, and what's more importantly is for the NATO states to protect Ukraine in the forms that will prevent this cancer that what we call now is Russian invasion from going on for years and from happening in the future, not just to Ukraine, but to any other countries that Russia has got their hands on and planning to either put their influence over or to attack in the future, politically or openly, what they did to Ukraine.
Sorry.
That's why, please mention about the Saturday. Come over here, bring your friends, bring your families. There will be special event. Also, don't forget that there will be number of rally stage across the London, which Paolo mentioned. So physically it's impossible to be in all those places at the same time. So please, timing is different, but we all know we have a different things to do. So please, for those who able to join the counter-protest that Paul mentioned, come and speak to him after, get more information, get more details. And for those who wants to come here for Saturday, 4 o'clock, Saturday rally, join after the counter-protest and join here with us. There will be special event dedicated to the NATO subject. Why NATO? Just briefly. Why NATO, you say? Why are we talking about the NATO? The history shows, and the Baltic states is a perfect example, and Poland. The history shows that by them joining NATO, Russian interest in those countries, it's been brought on a completely different level. They are unable to do to them any longer what they actually currently doing to Ukraine. They underestimated what they did doing to Ukraine. They underestimated because they thought Ukraine will be easy target, which we all know it's not. Ukraine's army, Ukrainian soldiers now proved that they are, if not better, as standards of the NATO, and they are showing the fierce fight to liberate the rest of Ukraine. The countries that joined the NATO over the last 10 years, this is something that Russia never wants to forget. But that fact that they joined the NATO, it's stopped the Russian invasion to those countries, and it stopped the Russia to put their political power and influence over those countries. Because the NATO policy shows that if you attack one of the member states, you attack entire NATO. But I'm not here to talk about the NATO. I'm just here to talk today about Ukraine and what's happening in Ukraine. The NATO subject and the NATO summit that will happen next week, they will be subject for Saturday. I'll just give you a bit of brief introduction to what's going to happen. We're here to support Ukraine and to remind the world that the war in Ukraine is going on. That's why it's important to continue your support for Ukraine and to come and join these rallies. There are many ways that you can help Ukraine, and we show the many examples. From donating old gadgets, to joining the rallies, to joining the counter-protest, because the Russian money and the Russian propaganda is not asleep. And the more they're losing at the battlefield, the more they will invest into their propaganda to destabilize and to break our power. So that's why we hear about those pro-Russian organized protests. That's why we hear that, and that's why it's important not to join this rally, but to join the counter-rallies and to be able, in a peaceful way, to protest against this injustice that currently happening in Ukraine. To protest against this nonsense that those pro-Russian rallies are based on. If you ask Pavel, he will be able to tell you that they are baseless. Most of them, they have 10 phrases that they cannot explain, only because they were told to tell this and that. One of them was the actual subject on the NATO, stating that NATO is conspiracy theory. NATO is actually surrounding the Russia. The fact that Russia been showing aggression to the countries who recently joined the NATO. NATO didn't call everyone to join them. The countries joined in the NATO for the protection, because the Russia, it's not to be trusted. And the conflicts in Georgia, Ossetia, even the Transnistria region, the conflicts that happening around, we're talking about the Baltic states, we're talking about the Poland a bit more back in the history. The conflicts in those countries, neighboring countries to Russia, Chechnya, Ossetia, those countries, everywhere they could destabilize and break the governments, those countries are only trying to protect because they have their citizens there, they have their children there. And the way that Baltic states and Poland choose to protect their states is by joining NATO, because the history proved, and that's what Russia strongly opposing, and they will invest heavily into propaganda, that is NATO fighting with Russia. It's a nonsense. Ukraine is defending own territories with the help of our friends and partners. But it's not NATO who invaded Ukraine. It's not NATO who fighting Russia. It's a Russia who invaded Ukraine. The Russia who kills, murders, torture, destroyed Ukrainian infrastructure, Ukrainian people, kidnapping Ukrainian children, raping Ukrainian women. This is what Russia does. So, this nonsense about the NATO fighting against Russia, it's no more than propaganda, baseless Russian propaganda, because the countries who joined in NATO recently over the last 10 years, they joined them for protection of the Russia mainly, because they cannot defend themselves. But we and them are not alone, and Ukraine is not alone, and Ukraine is fighting now with your help, because we are not alone. And we will win. Ukraine will win, regardless whether there will be progress over these NATO talks or not. Ukraine will have more guarantees, more friends, more support, because we're fighting for the right cause. Ukraine is fighting for freedom and democracy, and that's why Ukraine will win. Large or small, whatever this summit will bring to us, from the full membership status to just the additional support, anything will happen next week will be better for Ukraine, and they will just bring this victory in Ukraine a day closer. I truly believe this will happen. So it's not about the NATO, it's about the Ukraine. Together, only together, we're here to stop the Russia. Because Russia is the terrorist state, not the NATO, not Ukraine. The Russia who invaded Ukraine, they are terrorists, acting as a terrorist, and every single bombardment, every new rocket they launching and killing, murdering civilians, they are true terrorists. Russia is a terrorist state.
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 Ukraine might not become the next member of the NATO, or maybe they will. The history will show. But fact is that any conflict, any war, conflict that happening every day in Ukraine, the Russia has launching airstrikes against Ukraine, and they launching 50 airstrikes a day. Ukraine can only answer it back to them on a daily basis with roughly 15. So the balance of power in air is not to match. That's why Ukraine been trying to solve desperately to convince the world to supply Ukraine with the weapon that Ukraine is needed. That's why Ukraine has been asking to supply the fighter jets to Ukraine, to be able at least to be level in the air as we are on the ground. We only able to win this war quick enough by the world to providing the weapon and support that Ukraine is asking. But Ukraine needs more fighter jets. Ukraine needs more air defense. Ukraine needs your support of every government and the country. They backing, not to hesitate, not to delay, not to show the ignorance towards Ukraine subject, but to provide and help Ukraine with what is needed and what Ukraine is asking. One of them was, it's a fighter jets. Fighter jets for Ukraine!
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 Air defense 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 for Ukraine!
If most of the leaders would will to give Ukraine as much fighter jets or air defense as Tommy here, the war would have been won already a long time ago, and Ukraine would have everything that we're asking. But not everyone is on the same page, Not every country is supporting still. And they have reasons, whether they completely dependent on the Russian gas, oil, or money, or whether they such a corrupt that they have files of the materials on them that they cannot speak up for themselves. One or another reason, there are I'm talking few countries in the world that are not willing to support, and what's more important, are completely voting against any new sanctions or any new programs that the European Union is trying to approve and trying to bring forward. One of them, and I'm just gonna cite few, but one of them countries, it's Hungary. I don't want to say that the view of the Hungarian people, it's the view of the government. However, government generally elected by the citizen. But I'm sure that majority of the citizens of Hungary wants to have a peace and supports Ukraine. But the government spokesman, Zoltán Kovács, he published a column stating that the European Union and NATO have de facto become the party to the war in Ukraine, which is another nonsense. And he's got the right to write this because according to him this is happening because apparently the weapon been sent to Ukraine by the NATO allies. The help sent to Ukraine only for Ukraine to defend itself. And Ukraine haven't started this war. A bit earlier, the Prime Minister Orban is opposed the European Commission's plan to provide Ukraine with greater financial support. He made a corresponding statement on air on the local radio station, and the reports named European Truth. He's convinced that Russia has not suffered significant failure, but others, on the contrary, struggle against. It has produced a negative result to us, to everyone. Him, another one, it's a foreign affair minister of foreign affairs, Peter Siarto, if I'm not pronouncing the name, excuse me, stated that Ukraine does not meet the conditions of the EU membership due to the alleged violation of the right of the national minorities of the Transcarpathia. All those statements from the government official of just one country. I'm sure that the story goes way beyond all this, but I'm sure Hungary dependent on the Russia, and also the government is got the close tight with the terrorist regime in Russia, and they stating that the other problems is not their problems. They will continue to cooperate on the economical, financial subjects with the Russia, with the terrorist Russian regime. That for the rest of the world, it's already the well-known fact. It's not if and buts. We should not be supporting the terrorist regime, because the longer this support is happening from those few, the longer this war will go on, and more people will die, and more infrastructure will be destroyed in Ukraine. The sooner this few will choose the right side, the sooner this war will be over. The sanctions will work more effective. And the sooner Ukraine will get what Ukraine is asked, to be able to control the airspace, to be able to control our forces in the air. Because who controls the air? In generally speaking, that one controls the war. And Ukraine has been trying and asking hard to be able for those to provide Ukraine with air defense, with fighter jets, to be able to push the enemy back. not to push the enemy back to Moscow, but push the enemy back to the borders. This is what Ukraine is asking. Remember, Ukraine have not invaded anyone. And Ukraine is a victim here who fighting for the freedom. Russia is a terrorist. Russia invaded. And Russia is a cause of all this what happening in Ukraine. We must not punish the victim, but punish the aggressor. And aggressor is Russia. This war would never happen if Ukraine would be a NATO state in 2014. And the talks about that were going on back then. Unfortunately, this has not happened back then. The Russia has got choice. They can end this war today by stopping and withdrawing from Ukraine. Because if Russia will stop fighting, this war will end. If Ukraine stop fighting, there will be no Ukraine. So Ukraine is fighting for survival against the aggressor. And the aggressor is Russia. Stop Russia, stop the war.
Stop Russia, stop the war!
Stop Russia, stop the war.
Stop Russia, stop the war!
Stop Russia, stop the war.
Stop Russia, stop the war!
Stop Russia, stop the war.
Stop Russia, stop the war!
Stop Russia, stop the war.
Stop Russia, stop the war!
Russia is a terrorist state.
Russia is a terrorist state!
Russia is a terrorist state.
Russia is a terrorist state!
Russia is a terrorist state.
Russia is a terrorist state!
Russia is a terrorist state. Supporting and protecting Europe, protecting peace on the continent. Only together, only united. Ukraine will prevail. Слава Україні! Слава нації!
Смерть ворогам!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Захисникам України тричі! Слава! 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 Хто прийшов з мечем на Україну, той від меча і помре. Дякую.
Absolutely. The whole world seems to have forgotten a very important lesson that has been learned all the way back in the ancient times. Arms keep peace. And without the weapons to defend ourselves, without the ability to assert our existence against those who threaten it, we can't exist. With psychopathic countries such as Russia, modern-day Iran, North Korea, and many others who still exist, we need to be able to defend ourselves. We need to be able to defend our freedom and our future. That is what we want to achieve. That is always what Ukraine wanted. This is why Ukraine has given up the third biggest nuclear arsenal in the world, in the biggest nuclear demilitarization that has ever been done in human history. This was the Budapest Memorandum, in which Ukraine has simply given up their nukes. All of them went to Russia in exchange for nothing more than an agreement of non-violation of Ukrainian borders. Well, I'm certain that we all know how that turned out to be. Agreements with Russia are meaningless. You don't make agreements with somebody who you know is going to break them. You don't make agreements with terrorists and thieves and threats and murderers who are just waiting to backstab you at the first opportunity they get. And it's very interesting that these supposed pro-peace people are always universally defending the same exact points that Russia is pushing, and never the points that Ukraine wants to achieve. Because of course, if a nation gets attacked, who would you do? Who would you actually deal with? Would you deal with the victim who's getting attacked and who is defending themselves? Or are you going to deal with the aggressor? Are you going to try to remove power from the ones who are defending themselves and their existence? Or are you going to finally put the aggressor on their place? The metaphor stands clear, my friends. Imagine, in the middle of the street right now, two men fighting. One of them has started this fight because the other one did not want to be friends with him, because the other one said that he was not getting the respect he deserves. And then we get a crowd of people. And what do these people do? Well, are they going to tell them to stop? Are they going to try to put them all to different sides and stop the fight and intervene directly? Or are they going to speak with the victim and tell the victim to look for a peaceful solution, to look for peace and neutrality, when the victim has always wanted that, when the victim has always wanted peace, prosperity and trade? That, my friends, that is the situation in Ukraine right now. This Sunday, I went to Speaker's Corner with a few of our friends from our protests. One of them is right here, our man, Tommy Three Flags. And there were others. We all enjoyed our time in Speaker's Corner, but there were some specific arguments that are kind of too funny not to mention here. There was one particular that I remember very well. When we asked the Russophiles gathered around us what exactly should be done to help fix this situation, to help end this war, one of them, a particularly bright one, I'm sure you'll understand, said, "Walk away." And one of us answered, "How is a country supposed to walk away? How is a country, a people, a whole nation supposed to walk away from a conflict that has been declared against them? A conflict that has started so long ago, an invasion done, perpetrated by a terrorist state. I mean, is the country just supposed to develop legs under the crust and walk away on top of the earth? Or are they perhaps saying that they want all Ukrainians to become refugees and go into the rest of the world? Because neither of those solutions seem very tenable. No, my friends. We must not take these points seriously, but we have to face them. Because even the stupidest points will get some traction if we do not oppose them as we should. And now here's Tommy. Tommy is going to do something that we've been doing in the park, and it's a very interesting situation. Tommy is going to ask a question similar to the one that the Russophiles have been asking. Go on.
Oh, but Mr. Speaker, isn't Ukraine obliged to sit tight and be a good little victim and wait for the next Russian revolution with the workers that care about Ukraine so much?
Ah yes, this is something that's said by the many socialists. Workers of the world unite and all of that. Of course, they never mention that the Soviet Union was on the same side as Nazi Germany when the Second World War began. They kind of forget that part. It's quite important, I'm sure you'll find. But some people don't find it that way, because some people only mention the things that go in favor of their argument. Now, the problem with this argument is obvious. Is that Ukraine can't be idle right now. You can't simply not move and stand like a statue as you're getting punched, as you're getting attacked, as your life is being threatened. What are the Ukrainians supposed to do? To wait for the comrades, as we've heard. There are no comrades, my friends. There is only a great kleptocracy that we call Russia. That is what it is. A country-sized criminal syndicate that cares not for human lives, that cares not for the benefits of Ukraine or of the Russian people over any people, that only cares about maintaining the people in power there, in the same place they've been for a very long time now. Nothing has changed in the current Khanate of Muscovy. Nothing. Things have slightly changed here and there, but the foundation of the Muscovite state has remained the same ever since its genesis with Ivan the Terrible. Now this is something that we are at quite an impasse with the Muscovites, because they claim that Ukraine doesn't have a history, when in reality Ukraine was the genesis of Russian history in the Kievan Rus. To claim that is the same thing as if the Americans would claim, oh no, the UK never had a history. It was always America. Because nowadays America is more powerful. It's ridiculous, my friends. Absolutely ridiculous points given by absolutely ridiculous people, as I'm sure you will also find. But I would like to invite every person here who is willing and able to do the speeches for our cause here. Like me, like Serhiy, and like many others. Many other of our friends who come here and who speak, like Tommy, you know, our friend Tommy here, Allison, and many others. I say, whoever wants to speak should speak. And if they can't speak well, learn to speak well. And if you want to learn, come with us on Sunday. We will go to Speaker's Corner on this Sunday in the morning at 11 a.m. And we will start by doing a few speeches. Again, with Tommy and some other guys. So don't be shy, my friends. Come there and show us what you have got. Because we need speakers, we need people who are vocal. We don't need a silent majority. We need a vocal majority. People who actually show what they think. People who can explain why they defend what they are defending. Because that is really a move for a better future, my friends. Nothing will change if we're silent. Nothing. Everything will change if every single one of us makes that change happen. That is reality. That is what we want, and that is what we will achieve. All together, we will win.
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 World, wake up.
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 Help Ukraine protect peace.
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 And there is something we must never forget, because as Serhiy has mentioned, and as many of others have mentioned before, NATO is necessary. Now is the time when NATO is the most necessary in decades, perhaps ever. Because now is the time that Russia is threatening to destabilize all of Europe and perhaps the whole world. This war has been started by Russia. This war has been escalated by Russia. And if you're engaged by any Russophiles who start coming up with these apologetic views, that in reality it was something different. Oh, go on, Tommy.
Yes, but surely you should know that wasn't poor little Muscovy provoked by Ukraine?
Absolutely. One of my favorite points. Exactly the same point that the Russians have made after the invasion of Georgia. Of course, tiny little Georgia has provoked Russia, and they actually wanted to invade Russia. It's complete nonsense. Nonsense. We need to know history. We need to know what happened in the past, so that we don't make those mistakes again. People did not act when Georgia was invaded. People did not act when Russia has used chemical weapons in Syria. People did not act when Russia leveled Grozny. And people, unfortunately, have also not acted in 2014 when this war began. Now people are acting, because now it's obvious, even to the most foolish of individuals, that Russia will not stop at Ukraine. Russia is already preparing to destabilize Moldova. Russia is already preparing the next step in their genocidal conquest. We must not allow this to happen. And now I will give word to another one of our friends.
Слава Ісус Христу. А другий, мабуть, в Керчі, так буде правильніше. Бо Керч буде то саме останнє місце, яке москальська нога залишить. Ну і слава Україні!
Дякую. Thank you very much. What this fine gentleman has said now is that he mentioned these two flags that have been through a pilgrimage with him, and he's going to donate them, thank you very much, to the Ukrainian military. Now, my friends, our time is close to an end here today, but we must not stop speaking about what we're saying now, because our protest is everywhere, in your workplace, in your home, all over the street. Wherever you see individuals who are misinformed, uninformed, and disingenuous, wherever you see Russophiles, we have to oppose such ideologies. We have to oppose them because we have no choice. If we want to have a future, we need to make that future ourselves. We can't expect everything will be fine without us doing anything about it. We need to be active. We need to know, to inform ourselves, and we need to tell people about what we know. Because unfortunately, not everybody in the world knows the plight of the Ukrainian people. We have had many of our friends from all over the world coming here in support of us. We have done joint protests with Iran and with the Sudanese. We have done joint protests with many other people who are here right now, as we can see. And we have the unequivocal support of this country, the great country of Great Britain. And for that, we are very grateful. So for all the British people, for all of our friends from all over the world, thank you very much. And to end, remember, our protests happen every Wednesday at 6 o'clock, like we have today, every Saturday at 4 o'clock, and every Sunday at 3 o'clock. So don't miss out, my friends, every single time at 10 Downing Street, every single time for about 2 hours, and come to Speaker's Corner on Sunday at 11. Speaker's Corner, Hyde Park. Come and let's make this change happen. Thank you.
I just